Even if you tried, you wouldn't understand it. Maybe something's missing inside of you. Just a bit of sugar to that heartbeat bitter. Maybe you taste different. Hold up, baby. I can't sit beside you while you're going on about your simple life. Nothing left you thinking that maybe you're not different. Go on, blah.
Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me today for learning about 6 signs you have low progesterone. So I feel like every woman comes into understanding progesterone on her own time based on the symptoms that you're struggling with and the goals that you have in your life. I have noticed low progesterone quite a few times in my life, and I feel like I've talked about it quite a bit, but diving into it here, I think is really helpful because sometimes a lot of us don't know that we have it, and then we're struggling with it, and then we're trying to make all these changes that kind of reverse our symptoms from like our mood and our energy and our period and our cycle, and it just becomes like a whole thing. So I'm going to be covering 6 signs of low progesterone with you today that I have up on my blog. I actually did as a blog post, but I wanted to do a video in case that it's helpful to just have more of a conversation that we can have, I think, versus like in a blog post. But the first sign of low progesterone is actually a delayed, absent, or irregular cycle. So if your period, you're kind of like starting to track your cycle and you're noticing, hey, it's irregular, or like, hey, I have a really long cycle, or hey, I'm not having it at all, that is a sign to look more into your progesterone levels. And I'm going to be sharing some tips on how you can actually heal progesterone naturally. I'm sharing, I have a mini course about 8 steps to increase progesterone naturally. And it's something that has helped me so much. And it's where we can dive a little bit deeper if you're like, how do I actually do this? I will link that below, as well as some resources if you want to get your progesterone tested, just to be able to understand, like, is it off? So if you're noticing irregularity with your cycle, that's one of the first hormones to look at because it really is helping regulate essentially your cycle. So if it's off, that's something we want to look at. So I have noticed that in my own life. Like, I actually never tracked my cycle until about like 6 years ago. I'm filming this in 2022. So I noticed when I started tracking my cycle that my cycle was actually irregular and it was delayed. And so a healthy cycle is anywhere between 21 and 35 days. And we want it as consistent as possible. Mine was 40 to 43 days. And I was like, oh, that's not cool. So actually, even just tracking my cycle helped me figure out to know that I needed to do some work in terms of balancing my hormones. So I'll also share a video for you about how to get started tracking your cycle because I know it can be really confusing. But if you're noticing any sort of delay in your period, you haven't been having your period, or things are just irregular, progesterone is the first hormone that I would suggest looking at. And it's extremely helpful to dive into that. The second symptom for low progesterone is if you have a short luteal phase. So actually doing the math of our cycle and our cycle phases helps give indication to any hormones that you need to look at. So a short luteal phase is something to look at. So technically a healthy luteal phase is anywhere between 10 and 14 days. And my luteal phase was always at 10 days, which is what I thought was healthy, and I didn't need to look into progesterone. But when my husband and I started to conceive for our first baby, I noticed that like a 10-day luteal phase is actually too short for fertility. So my everyday wellness, I actually didn't have PMS. I had a great period. I worked so much on balancing my cycle that I didn't really think of that I needed to do any more work on progesterone. But when I was starting my fertility journey, I noticed I do need to boost my progesterone levels. And it was one of the reasons why we weren't getting pregnant. So for fertility, to dive deeper into progesterone, in case you guys end up trying, or just keep this in the back of your mind if you ever want children, a healthy luteal phase for fertility is 12 to 16 days. So if you can elongate that fertility window for your luteal phase, It gives more time for the progesterone to build up the lining of your uterus so that an egg can implant. And I definitely noticed that when my husband and I were trying to conceive, that we were having a hard time with the implantation phase, which then went into my progesterone levels. So I share that with you in case any of my experience can shorten your learning curve. If you're trying to have a baby, progesterone is really important for when we're trying to conceive, and especially during that first trimester of our pregnancy, we really need progesterone to be as healthy as possible. So a lot of women in the Balanced Bombshells community either want children now or they know they want them someday. So just file that away, depending, no matter where you're at in your journey. But if your luteal phase is less than 10 days, that's definitely an indication that progesterone needs to be boosted. And if you're trying to conceive and you're like, hey, I have a 10-day luteal phase, you could be like me and you just need a little bit of extra support to elongate it to really up your chances of getting pregnant. So that definitely, I feel like, would have saved me so much time and energy when we were first trying. So the third symptom of low progesterone is if you have any sort of depression, anxiety, or other mood changes before your period. Progesterone is actually a very calming hormone. So basically what that means is when we have enough progesterone before our period, we are actually supposed to feel very calm and zen. And so if you think of women who have PMS symptoms and they have a lot of irritability, they have a lot of depression, they feel anxious before their period, that is an indication to look into balancing progesterone more, because the healthier progesterone is, the more stable our mood is going to be, especially during that week before our period, where more women are susceptible to PMS symptoms. So if you know my story at all with hormone balancing, I used to struggle with PMDD, which is a more intense version of PMS, and it caused a lot of depression before my period, a lot of mood swings, very intense irritability. Like I just definitely did not feel like myself, and it went into having low progesterone. So understanding that connection is actually going to help you feel calmer before your period. It's going to get rid of mood swings. And I can tell you from experience, by balancing my progesterone, my mood feels so stable before my period, even after having a baby. I definitely noticed I did not go back to the state I was in years ago when I had really low progesterone, because I could tell it in my mood, especially as my cycle came back after having a baby. And I was like, oh, this is so important for women to know. So if you're feeling moody before your period, definitely looking into how you can naturally boost your progesterone levels is going to help you feel more calm and relaxed before your period and during your period. So you might notice just this overall sense of like balance, and you just feel more like yourself. And it's a very powerful hormone, which is why I wanted to do a video of just kind of educating you of what to look out for in case you need to boost it, because it just makes your life so much better. And so before we get into the other three symptoms, I just kind of want to share a little bit more about progesterone and why it's important, not only because it makes us feel calm and happy before our period, but it's a beauty hormone that actually helps our hair, it helps our skin, it helps us with fertility, it helps us with pregnancy. It is very, very powerful. But one of the reasons why so many of us can experience symptoms of low progesterone is because of our active and busy lifestyles. So cortisol is a stress hormone that competes for the same receptors of progesterone. So the more stressed that we are, the less likely progesterone could attach when it's supposed to, because cortisol is dominating and is too high. So basically cortisol goes to attach where progesterone is. Progesterone can attach when it's supposed to, and then it causes us to feel more irritable, more stressed, more anxious, more depressed. And sometimes it can be just making some changes in our lifestyle to make sure that our stress levels stay low. Definitely looking at your fitness and what that looks like. I actually scale back on my workouts. I cycle sync my workouts, and I scale back on my cardio and levels of intensity before my period, so that progesterone can be healthy and cortisol isn't dominating. Because sometimes when we're too intense on our workouts, it causes cortisol to go up, especially when you're working on balancing your progesterone levels. You just want to be mindful. So in my 8 steps to naturally increase progesterone, I include how you can cycle sync your workouts as well. So you can kind of play with the intensity, play with how your cycle is, so that it actually makes more of a balanced month. And then you'll actually feel, especially when I work with myself and my clients on this, you'll actually feel more energetic before and during your period, just even by tweaking your lifestyle and your workouts. Like, it is beyond fascinating what we can do to just help balance our body. So let's get into the next steps or the three next symptoms of low progesterone. And so I see this very often with women, and it's migraines or headaches before your period. So if you're noticing you're getting a lot of headaches and you're just like, wow, I'm not feeling like myself, that can also be a sign of low progesterone, because progesterone is meant to stay kind of even keel, and then it'll drop before our period starts. Sometimes what can happen if we don't have enough progesterone is it can drop too quickly, and that hormone change can cause a lot of migraines and headaches in women. So definitely pay attention to if you're having these hormonal headaches, because that can also be an indication of low progesterone. I used to get migraines so bad during my period, and by naturally increasing progesterone, I actually don't suffer from the hormonal headaches anymore. So it's very life-changing. The next symptom of low progesterone is bloating before your period, which I know is a very, 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 very common complaint that women have before their period, is the stupid water retention and bloating. So if you can actually balance your progesterone, progesterone is a hormone that actually helps us flush fluid retention and not hang on to that extra fluid. It's meant to help you stay lean. So it's a very powerful hormone, even in our physique, and controlling that water retention. So I also noticed that by increasing my progesterone levels, I did not feel bloated before my period. I didn't struggle with the same 5 to 10 pounds of water weight. I would have a hard time like buttoning my pants because I would retain so much fluid before my period. It's because I didn't have enough progesterone. So if you're able to help fix your progesterone levels, you will also notice that bloating goes down, and you just no woman wants to carry water weight. Like no woman wants that whatsoever. So naturally increasing your progesterone is also going to help with that bloating before your period. And then the sixth sign of low progesterone, this is more of a heavy one, but if you are having a difficult time conceiving, or if you've had frequent miscarriages, that is also a sign of low progesterone. So like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we need progesterone to be able to conceive. We need progesterone to be able to definitely work through that first trimester as your body's going through the building blocks of having a baby. And if we don't have enough progesterone, our bodies can't support a healthy pregnancy. So I did have a miscarriage about just 10 weeks shy of the first time we got pregnant. And it was not caused by low progesterone. I actually had my progesterone levels tested before we got pregnant the first time, and they were perfect. So sadly, like we just ended up being one of those pregnancies that, you know, like my body just didn't, it was recognizing that it wasn't going to be a healthy pregnancy, and the science of our bodies is smart. And it's just like, hey, this isn't going to give you the end result of the happy and healthy baby that you want. So there's definitely cases like that where hormonally you're strong, you can have a baby, and we just sometimes have a miscarriage for the science of our bodies. And, you know, our bodies are smart and our bodies wise, and I really try to trust the process. But the miscarriage that we had actually plummeted my progesterone levels. So our hormones levels drop after you have a baby, and they can drop when you have a miscarriage. So when I was about 6 weeks pregnant with Dylan, I was like, I feel like my progesterone might be too low. I was kind of recognizing some of these signs of low progesterone, and I went in to get my levels tested, and it was too low for pregnancy. So I actually had to supplement with progesterone through the first trimester with my son Dylan, and it helps save a healthy pregnancy. So it's something to just really be mindful of, especially if you're going to be on your journey of having children, either now or in the future, because it's a very important hormone for maintaining a healthy pregnancy. So yes, we can go through these situations where we have a miscarriage, but if you notice you're having frequent miscarriages, or you're coming up against some of these other symptoms of low progesterone, definitely getting your progesterone levels tested and just kind of understanding what can you be doing to increase them. So I have had to lean on progesterone supplementation as I was working through my journey, but the 8 steps to naturally increase your progesterone goes through food that's super targeted on increasing your progesterone. I cover supplements that I've used for increasing progesterone, as well as some natural herbs that really were supportive, and some lifestyle changes to make sure that your stress levels are as low as possible, because that's going to naturally increase progesterone so that you're feeling as happy and healthy as you should be in your cycle and on your journey wherever you're at in balancing your hormones. So thank you for joining me on this video. If you have any questions, I'm happy to read them through the comments below and answer them for you, or create more content around how you want to naturally increase progesterone. So thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time.
Maybe something's missing inside of you. Just